Hi everyone and welcome to Cherry Red TV. A few years ago, Bruce Springsteen was asked what music he was listening to. His reply, Pete Molinari, and if you don't know him, is great. Well, if you want to know a little bit more about Pete, you've come to the right place because he joins me now to look over his career to date and particularly to look forward to his new album, Theosophy, which is released on Cherry Red Records in June 2014. Welcome, Pete.
Good to see you, mate.
So let's start at the beginning. You were born and raised in Kent, part of a large family with international roots.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how that kind of fed into your musical tastes?
Yeah, I was born in a place called Chatham in Kent, and I was born within a large family, you know. My father is from Alexandria in Egypt, born and brought up there. My mother from Malta. And I was raised in a family of 9 siblings. I got 5 brothers and 3 sisters. And they all kind of, especially my older brothers, had a large record collection. And I think that's what kind of mainly brought me into, there was guitars lying around and, you know, piano and all that kind of stuff, and I wasn't, you know, into anything else other than just sitting around playing music and listening to their record collection. So I think you know, the majority of it came from them. My dad always kind of had some European stuff going on. I think that works its way in there somewhere, but it was generally their collection of rock and roll and country and blues and all of that kind of stuff that got me at a time when, you know, all my friends were listening to something else, really. So I was kind of out of time in a lot of ways. Probably still am. But I generally think I think it was, you know, a mixture between my environment, you know, growing up in Chatham and Rochester in Kent, and also, you know, my home environment, which was completely different. You know, it was influenced from completely different part of the world. So yeah, mainly that.
So as you say, you know, it's the music that kind of fed through to you from your family was, I guess, as you say, it was quite different for a young guy growing up in England, in the Britpop years, if you like.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff were you kind of latching onto at that sort of age?
Well, it's kind of from there. I mean, I was aware of what was going on. You know, all my friends were listening to Oasis and Blur and the Stone Roses and all that kind of stuff. I've only just come around to kind of listening to some of those things now. You know, seeing as I have friends that are in those bands. But at that point, it was me. You know, I still actually remember someone showing me a Smiths record with Elvis's face on the front, you know, and I was kind of more intrigued by the fact that it was Elvis's face on the front than the fact that it had Smiths written on it. But it was mainly listening to, you know, the greats, really. I mean, you know, Buddy Holly and Little Richard and Ray Charles and all the Sun Record stuff and everything that was kind of coming from America came over from America that I guess influenced all the British bands in the 60s, you know, and then I learnt a lot about the Beatles, and then from that kind of once I started to play and get interested in the whole kind of, you know, songwriter thing, once you start to listen to records and read the imprint and read who wrote what, and you know, you listen to a Patsy Cline record and you find out that Hank Williams wrote it and you question who Hank Williams is, and then you go and find out about that. So it was kind of me finding out about all of this stuff and you know, applying that to me learning the guitar and playing around with songs myself. And I, you know, obviously having guitar lessons or anything like that when you're in a big family is too much of a luxury. So it was mainly me just sitting around, fooling around on the guitar and coming up with my own things, you know, myself. But and then, you know, a big thing was when I went to art college, I kind of got to know Billy Childish quite well, which is a character from my hometown as well. So he was kind of like it was a really big deal for me. It still is, because I always thought that these great figures existed in you read about from the past, like Woody Guthrie or Leadbelly, or artists and painters, and I kind of discovered that there was this great artist in my hometown, so I kind of ended up on his doorstep for quite some time.
So what kind of age were you when you started sort of seriously writing songs?
Seriously, I don't know. I mean, I always think, you write 50 rubbish things before you land on something good. But it was mainly, I played, guitar and piano a little bit and harmonica, all self-taught through school. And then I had that period going to art school, which is kind of like this, grey area where you kind
years.
of all I was ever into at school was art. So it was, reading about Van Gogh and whoever else, and always a big kind of European influence in my house. Again, not just with music, it was with art and literature. So as much as I was learning about things from America, I had my dad telling me about, the Italian artists are the only good ones, like Michelangelo and all those people. And the same with film. I learned a lot from them, though. You start to, you don't appreciate it at the time, like watching a Fellini film or something, but now it's kind of like a really big deal to me. And I was quite, influenced by all the literature as well that was going on. But it was mainly through art school that I started to think, I'm a musician. I want to take this seriously, because, sticking around here is not going to do me much good. It was kind of, you go to, I don't know, I don't want to put the establishments down, but I always find that if you've got the soul of an artist, you find that there's little of that going on in some of these schools and universities. So it didn't, apart from hanging around and, going to parties and stuff, I didn't do great at art school, but I definitely did find my way through to music at that period.
So after you'd left school and you kind of did quite a few day jobs, you decided to go on a visit to the US, to America. Yeah. I think I've read somewhere that you kind of initially went for a couple of weeks and you ended up staying on and off for a couple of years.
Pretty much. My first visit was at that time when I was at school, because I have some family over in San Francisco. And as growing up as a kid, every now and again, one of the family members would come over and they would bring us a book or two or this or that. I actually remember having like Bound for Glory as a kid, which was really great, the Woody Guthrie book, and On the Road, and John Steinbeck books from my cousins over there, that they would bring over. But so my first trip to the States was at that time when I started to kind of like, look at writing things and playing places seriously, and actually, having the balls to get up in front of an audience and do that. So I went off to San Francisco, stayed there for a few months, I think, just kind of hanging out with my cousins, and then coming back. It was New York, really. It was even, I had my mind set that I would either, love to be around the cafes of New York like I would anywhere, but also really into the South. I was musically into things that came out of Nashville and came out of Memphis and all of the rock and roll and country records I heard as a kid. But it was New York that I ended up going to, and really, I really liked that space. It occupied my mind brilliantly. I just didn't want to leave. So it was mainly going back and forward there, from London and Rochester back to New York playing. I ended up kind of like playing a lot of every cafe and park I could. I was kind of playing the park all day, literally for hours on end. You naturally become a good player even without noticing it. Actually, you kind of, when you're playing something that long, even if you're doing Hank Williams all day or something, you soak everything up, like a sponge. And I was playing some really late night cafes, 2, 3 in the morning. New York's a late night place, so it's you discover that being there. You play a gig at 10 p.m. no one's there. You play at 1 o'clock in the morning, everyone's there. So it's the best places were the places where people were generally just handing around a basket for you'd end up with $5 at the end, but you got this great audience. I really learnt a lot from being there.
So you took all of those influences and eventually you're at the point where you were ready to make your first album.
Yeah.
And you went back home and made it with Billy Childish, who we were talking about before.
I did, yeah. I came home always kind of, into what Billy was doing, always had the old records that I'd got, from all of his different incarnations and bands. And it was at a time when he was in a group called the Buff Medways, but he also did a record. He had this other little group, I still believe he does do it, called the Chatham Singers, which was a kind of him sitting around rather than his usual punk rock, garage rock thing. It was him kind of sitting around playing blues in the way he liked it. So he made this. I remember there's a couple of records, but the first one was called Heaven's Journey, and I just really liked the way it was recorded. It was a really great group of songs. And it was recorded on his Revox machine, little tape machine, half track or whatever he calls it, I don't know, in his state-of-the-art home studio. But it sounded to me like one of the, Alan Lomax things that I had these Folkways records that I really liked as well. And this was something I discovered myself. This didn't come through, the rock and roll things I'd listened to from my older brothers. It was like mainly I started to find out about Leadbelly through Billy, told me a lot about Sondhaus and all of these people I should listen to. And the sound of that record I really, really liked. So when it came to talking to Ian from Damaged Goods, I went to Billy and asked him if I could make a record like that, really, that sounded like that. And
it does have that kind of simple, minimalistic, arrangement. It really kind of puts the songs, and particularly your voice, sort of front and centre.
That's what he wanted, really. I mean, I kind of, whoever I'm working with, I kind of put myself in their hands, and he's someone, you have to put yourself in, you have no choice. I always admire his way of doing anything, but it came about to be something really good in the end. I mean, as we were going through it, he started to, bring his own songs to the table. So I was into doing maybe one of his songs. I ended up doing about 6 or something, but and ended up recording some with his wife Julie, which was really nice. She has this old time. I really like her vocal. It sounds like someone from the 1930s, And
it's a lovely blend between your two voices.
I think they're my favourite tracks probably on that record, are the ones me singing with her. And we always talked about maybe doing something together, me and her, but she's really great, and he's good at everything he does. So I'm a big fan of that first record. I was keen to do something else straight away, but I mean, I think Billy would have made me, liked it that I did another 10 records like that. But, that's what he does, and he's good at it.
So you did move quite quickly to album number 2, which was a virtual Landslide.
Yeah.
And that was recorded at Toe Rag Studios in London with Liam Watson, which is kind of famously where people like the White Stripes did some of their early stuff.
That's right.
That record, I think, was kind of born of a little bit of a mutual love of certain types of music and recording between you and Liam. Is that right?
It was too, yeah. I think initially it was me, playing. I was playing a club in London, like I was with Billy quite a bit, or even Holly sometimes. I think she was on Damaged Goods, or she is on Damaged Goods. But it was, Liam had worked with Billy, I think, long before the White Stripes and other bands. So he's made so many records. I don't know which ones exactly were made there, but I think, a lot of the Headcoat stuff, I think that period was done at Toe Rag. I might be wrong, but I obviously the connection to Billy and me and Liam talked about doing a record. We were at that club, a really good club called What's Cooking, in London, out in like the middle of the night, out in Leytonstone or somewhere like that. Well, not a lot happens, but this club was really great, and I was playing there all the time. And Liam was there one night playing some records, and we spoke about doing some stuff. So I just went. I was intrigued to go to the studio. I'd heard so much about it, and you know, you hear all of these things, or you read all of these things, and it's a little bit like this, or a little bit like Sun Records in London, and you know, I just wanted to experience it for myself. So we went down there, and I think I just had the idea that I was going to record a similar record to what I did the first one with Billy, but you know, do it in a studio. You know, I didn't have any idea that musicians were going to be involved or anything like that. I just knew I had these songs that I wanted to get onto very quickly and do. So I just thought it was going to be me, the guitar and the harmonica, and when I started to speak to Liam about stuff, I realised how much he liked a lot of the things that I did. So it was a mutual. And the things I'd read about him, obviously, were that he'd, you know, done all of this garage and punk rock and Billy and the White Stripes, but when I started to speak to him and his knowledge of music, and you know, we started to talk about Roy Orbison and Hank Williams and Chet Atkins and all of these kind of records we all really liked, and I think that kind of, you know, something built up into his head that he wanted to make that kind of record, and he asked me how I felt about having some musicians put around me, of which I knew none. I knew some people in America, but I didn't really know anyone in London. I didn't really pay that much attention to who played what, and so he knew everyone. And he just said, "I'll deal with it, and I'll you know, bring in some really good guys." And I thought it was a good idea. So the day I recorded, the first day was the day that I met these chaps.
Wow.
You know? It was
so no pre-rehearsal or anything?
No rehearsal at all. It was just kind of like, you know, shaking hands, saying hello, and they're a great bunch of guys, friends. I mean, you know, when he said to me about putting fine musicians around me, I kind of knew, and you know, I'd read all of these stories about Nashville musicians and the A-Team and who Owen Bradley and Chet Atkins recorded with. So, but he really meant it. These guys were so good. It was, you know, have a cup of tea, shake your hand, run through stuff, and it was straight into, you know, a couple of takes on certain things. I think some of them, even the first, we used. I don't know which ones, but it was no more than a couple of run-throughs on the songs. It was magic. It was really great. I think Matt Radford and Rupert Brown, Carwin, Ellis, Ned Turner, just great musicians. You know, you can't go wrong.
And so that album won you a Best Newcomer nomination at the Mojo Awards.
Did too.
It got praise from people like Ray Davies and Paul Weller. I mentioned the Springsteen quote as well in my introduction. Are those kind of things sort of affirmation of the work for you, or, you know, do accolades and praise kind of is something that, you know, you can kind of, it doesn't mean that much to you?
I can't say it doesn't mean anything to me. I don't think it kind of like, I don't think it gives me any more reassurance that what I'm doing is any good or anything like that. Otherwise, I'd kind of, if my whole kind of world or the way I saw my music or the way I played it was made up for other people's kind of, you know, other people's views on it, or whether they liked it or they don't, then I think that would be pretty sad. But at the same time, I think it's an amazing thing when someone acknowledges you, you know, or acknowledges what you do. You don't really get to know any of these people that well. You're fortunate if you do become friendly with some of them. I think it's the best accolade, actually. I mean, like, if someone gives you an award, it might be nice on the night, and you have a glass of champagne and a good meal and enjoy the night. But when someone says something about what you've done and, you know, gives a nod towards it, that kind of lasts. And
I guess particularly if it's someone that you yourself admire their work.
Yeah, really. I mean, some of these people. You know, I'm not up to speed sometimes with a lot of contemporary things. So when someone that is around that kind of, I think it was, I must admit, there's a chap called Richard Hawley, who's a great guy. You know his music, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And at the time, you know, it was mentioned that he was really like that record and was praising it and saying all these nice things. And he's such a sweet chap, you know, great musician. As well. I'd only found out about him at that point, so I was kind of out of the loop with all of that. I know he kind of goes back to playing with Pulp and all of these kind of people, and done so many sessions. And,
That's right.
but then it was good because I'd discovered all of, you know, I'd started to listen to his records and heard about Cole's Corner and this and that and the other, and we became real good friends too. So it's nice when you learn about someone through that kind of thing, you know. But yeah, there's no better thing I think than when someone kind of, you know, gives you some praise for something. Try not to take it too much on board and just, you know. But
so moving on to album number 3, which was A Train Bound for Glory.
Yeah,
You actually went over to the US this time and recorded that in Nashville. Was that something that you kind of always wanted to do at some point when in the recording process?
I guess. I mean, I didn't think about it too much. I guess from reading about the sessions that happen there, like anywhere, you know, New York or Nashville or Memphis, they're like, you know, they're kind of like holy places when it comes down to talking about music. But I think it happened mainly from an EP that I did before, and it happened by chance. It was kind of, I think had I planned it, I probably wouldn't have done it, you know. It's just, Ian Ballard from Damaged Goods was on to me about he kept talking about, in live shows, I would sometimes do songs like A Satisfied Mind or Tennessee Waltz, you know, like people do. They add a cover on the end of their set, or they, you know, introduce something to show their influences and all that kind of stuff. So yeah. I'm always kind of... that's the way I like to kind of point praise towards someone, is by playing one of their songs, you know.
Okay.
So if you're playing something by Leonard Cohen or by Hank Williams or whoever, Billy even, you're doing that. And Ian had this idea, I think, that I would put these things on record, which I didn't like the idea at first. It's quite daunting, obviously. Yeah. When you listen to these songs and they're done so well and they're... So we talked about it for a long time. I was kind of against it. And then I went over to Nashville I had some friends that invited me down. They were from New York, and there was a friend there that had recorded some stuff, and I got introduced to a bunch of people in Nashville, you know, Chris Scruggs and these other people. And I then thought this thing could possibly be a good idea, you know. It was kind of like... We'd just record 4 songs as an EP that would be like classic covers or, you know, versions of these tracks recorded with Nashville players. It sounded more appealing to me then. It kind of like I started to see it from a different perspective, and, you know, recording somewhere else in the studio in Nashville. These songs were written in these places and recorded in these places originally. So it's just that at first. I did this EP, Today, Tomorrow, Forever, 4-track 10-inch thing, which was great on vinyl, and then I'd got on with these musicians so well, and, you know, one thing led to the other, and we talked about this and that, and we had, you know, crazy idea like this backing group, the Jordanaires, which were obviously, I don't have to mention what they do, they're kind of legendary vocal group. They were invited down by Chris. He had a connection.
They sang with Elvis, is that
Elvis
that right?
is obviously the most well-known example of who they sang with, and connection, but they're on every kind of, at least all the major sessions. If you've got, you know, anything from kind of mid-50s to 60s Nashville stuff, from the Chet Atkins recordings to Owen Bradley, you've got the Jordanaires on either Patsy Cline or, you know, all of those. It's either the Jordanaires or the Anita Kersingers, I think, which were on Roy Orbison records, and, you know, I think with Elvis, I think they're also involved in a lot of TV footage, so there's the major connection. But they're on Crazy and Sweet Dreams and all of these incredible records, you know. The amazing thing was not just recording with them, it was talking to them and finding out about
the history of it.
Yeah, I mean, asking them questions about songs that, you know, you've been listening to, like Only the Lonely or something, since you're a kid. It's quite a marvellous thing when they're telling you that they wrote these vocal parts and they'd done this and done that and been in this session with the Everly Brothers or something. It's quite mind-blowing. But that developed into me having, again, you know, a bunch of songs that I thought were perfect for that thing. You know, I'm always a fan of something unfolding as you feel it should, and being in the moment and getting the energy from that. So I went off to Nashville and recorded with those musicians that I recorded this EP with. And invited the Jordanaires back as well.
Kind of one thread that runs across all of your output really is, and people talk about it a lot, is the kind of unique sound of your voice. Is that something that you work on, you know, sort of really closely, or is it something that kind of just comes naturally to you?
I would like to think it comes naturally. I think I don't work on it. Maybe I should. I mean, I think, obviously when you're out playing and this and that and recording in the studio, you know, whatever you write, it becomes a challenge in some way. But I think it's probably the one thing that is natural and the one thing that I just let happen rather than try and make happen, you know. I mean, we can all become, or think we can become better at something. I don't know, it's the same with the songs. I like to think that the things I try harder at sometimes are not as good, you know. I don't know, I always find that something that unfolds naturally is better, and certainly vocally I think it's that way. Thanks for the kind words, by the way.
No worries. I also wanted to briefly touch on your visual image, something that's obviously very important to you. I always feel woefully underdressed in your presence.
Now you look pretty.
Is that kind of a conscious statement, or is it just simply kind of what you like to wear?
I think it's what I like to wear. It's no more a conscious statement than the music, so I guess in some way it is. I don't know. I like to play around and, you know, have my own thing going on, and, you know, it's not like I've got a stylist out there somewhere. Although you never know. But no, it's always something. I think you create yourself in some way. You know, there's a self in all of us, and we create that. And you know, whether I wear a tie or a hat or something, I'm just having fun with it. You know, generally. So, but I like style in general. You know, I don't know much about fashion. I think fashion's something that probably is more towards, you know, following what's going on right now. So I'm definitely not that, but I'm always on the lookout for something. I'll take you around a few shops.
I think I need a bit of sprucing up. So let's talk about the new album, Theosophy. As I said, released in June 2014. Let's start with the title. Can you explain a little bit of the reasoning behind that?
I wanted a one-word title for the album. I was always after something like, you know, my titles have always been a bit of a kind of mouthful, you know, Virtual Landslide or Train Bound for Glory or etc. And I, you know, I will keep this light-hearted because it could end up like a church sermon or something. It's not actually a religious viewpoint at all, although some people might align it with that, but it's just a philosophical thing in itself. It's the word itself means, it's from the Greek. It's two words, which is Theos and Sophia. I think Theos meaning God and Sophia meaning wisdom. So Theosophy is a esoteric philosophy, I guess. I go to the Theosophical Society. I read those books by... the Theosophical Society was formed by a woman called Helena Blavatsky, a Russian lady in the 1800s. She was, she was the first, I believe, or one of the first to bring Eastern philosophy to the West.
Okay.
And she formed the society, although, Theosophy did exist way back to the Greeks, talked about it as a term, the word. But it's like an occult science or esoteric philosophy, whichever way you want to look at it, to find out more things about yourself, I guess, or the real self. That's what it is. It's like it's finding out things beyond what we know of ourselves on a personality level. So it's just what I'm into. I also go to other things, Share International and at the Alice Bailey School. Anything that I can kind of get my head around, or I'm just interested in those kind of things. I just do meditation in different circles, but it's mainly that. So I thought this album, it started off mainly this record with a track. One of the tracks was a track called What I Am. So Theosophy just made sense for me. I don't know. I like the word and it rolls off the tongue nicely.
So it's been 4 years since A Train Bound for Glory, which is the longest gap that you've had between albums.
Yeah.
Was that kind of you sort of deliberately taking longer over the writing process, or were there other reasons for that?
Not really. The writing process for me is kind of... I'm one of those people who kind of like constantly am writing something. So I know there are a lot of artists that I speak to that are like, well, I've got to write an album and get 12 songs together, and I'm never really like that. I've always got this kind of like stuff going on. So I don't consciously sit down and say, right, I'm going to have these 12, 13 songs or 10 songs for a record. I just go into the studio and whatever I get up at the time, I think, we'll try this and we'll try that with whichever musicians I'm with. So as far as the writing process, no, that's not there, and even the recording process, But I think as far as the whole, I don't want to use the word project, I guess it's the only word I can use, the whole album thing as itself, I think getting the people involved in it that I wanted to do is a conscious kind of like, I wanted to do something a bit different. It was still going to be me, my voice and my playing and everything, but I was just conscious that I wanted to work with other people rather than do the usual go in the studio in London or in Nashville or in wherever. I just, wanted to work with other artists and maybe do different tracks in different places. I'm not sure. I wasn't 100% about anything. I just had a loose idea about working with maybe people like Andrew or Chad, and it unfolded as it should. And some of the musicians I wanted involved on certain tracks that I'd asked, it took a little bit of time. So, I mean, generally, I never planned it would take, I'd have 2 albums out a year, gladly, but it doesn't kind of work like that sometimes, But I'd rather be much more prolific, to be honest. I mean, I have the material there, so I'm quickly wanting to get onto the next thing when people are into the present thing, I'm in too much of a rush sometimes.
And you recorded some of the album on the Isle of Wight.
Did, yeah.
Is it in an old water tower that used to belong to Queen Victoria?
As far as I'm aware, yeah. Okay. That's the story.
And I've read that you kind of felt that there was something in the air, if you like, that influenced the songs and the recording that took place there.
Yeah, it kind of aligns itself with the Theosophy thing in a way, but I heard all these things about this place. One of the tracks I went to record, it was from a session we were coming back from Wales, and I recorded one track with Chad Blake over there, and as we were coming back in the car with the musician friends of mine, Rupert, Tom, Little Barry, this place was mentioned to me for the first time. I think it was Rupert that said kind of, it's a great studio, these guys are really good, Jim and Rob Holmes, and they told me about this place being haunted and all this crazy stuff, which I was like, yeah, all right, whatever. But I don't know about those things. All I know is that it was a really, really great session. It seemed to glue itself together very quickly. So if there's any sense in that and and Theosophy and all of that kind of stuff that I believe in, or find out about in a way. I think it had a lot to do with that session, and more than ever, I think the album title has more relevance to it because of that. Again, it was my real reason actually for going down there to record was that the musicians that I really liked were there. The studio was one thing. I didn't even really know Jim Ross at that time, the engineers, but the musicians, are very important, obviously, on a recording. And the drummer and the guitarist and the bass player and that I knew were based there, and if I went there, it would just be a much easier thing. And then I found out from going there that this place was great, Studio Humbug, and the session kind of evolved pretty quickly, like the toe rag session, before. And Rupert was involved in that one, so he kind of, he kind of helped it along quite a bit. But it was mainly me on an acoustic guitar, sitting down playing the songs to the guys and getting on with it. It was kind of happened like that, just like you read about or you heard about.
I think you kind of said that the recording process for this album generally. You wanted to take a little bit more of a kind of loose, laid-back approach to it, kind of letting things happen rather than trying to make them happen, if you like. A quote that I read was that you finally gave yourself over to abandonment during this recording.
Yeah.
Why did you feel that kind of now was sort of the right time in your career to do those things?
Again, it wasn't conscious. I think in Nashville, I felt like I was kind of like, maybe trying to control stuff. I don't know. I'm never too aware of that. But looking back on it in hindsight, I felt like I was, maybe feeling like I wasn't letting stuff happen as well as I should. But with that phrase actually came from Chad Blake being in the studio over in Wales, and he says these things, that I'd never heard. And he was kind of said something about, I love the sense of abandonment, and I kind of knew what he meant but didn't know what he meant exactly, so I looked into it, checked it out a bit, and I kind of got it, and I was like, yeah, you have to have a sense of abandoning everything you've done before in a way, because you've got to approach. You don't abandon it, but you have to kind of adopt that in some way. Otherwise, I think you'll create boundaries and formats for yourself and ideas that kind of like
restrict you a little bit.
They do. They restrict you, and so I adopted Chad's abandonment philosophy and used that towards this record, I think. And I kept saying that to the musicians, to get them in check. But it did really help. I think everyone just kind of did their bit, and we came up with that sound, which was really, it really feels that way actually when I hear it. It feels that there is a sense of abandonment.
And of course we should talk about the cast list of names that are on the album. You've got some great people involved. So let's kind of go through them one by one. Firstly, Barry Cadogan, who plays guitar in Primal Scream now.
Yeah.
How did he become involved in the project?
Barry's, I call him Little Barry sometimes, that's his group, but I've known him since, he used to work over at a shop early on in Denmark Street. A lot of the London musicians I know are along there somewhere, even the bass player I play with now. Barry's just an amazing player, I don't know much about guitar heroes and all that kind of stuff. I'm not really into it a lot of the time. 10 seconds is enough for a guitar solo for me, often. But I just kind of, I don't know, he's a sweet guy really, and just a really amazing musician. So we've always done, I think, for the past few years we've always kind of, I've invited him on to certain things if he's been around. He's busy a lot with Primal Scream and his own stuff. But he turns up sometimes when he's around, comes along to a radio session, or been on stage with us a few times. I'm just fortunate enough to, you know, have someone like him play on a track or two. It's great. Now, I wanted him to be on a track from the beginning. I think he ended up on a couple, so I was lucky.
And keeping the Primal Scream connection going, we've got Andy Weatherall, who obviously produced Screamadelica, which was their seminal album, had his own success with the likes of Sabres of Paradise. So he did some production duties on some of the album, is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I started talking to him about it as early as when I came back from... I mean, I spoke to him right back in the... You know, he used to come and see Billy play a lot. He's a big fan of Billy's, and, you know, I got to know him through then, although I didn't really know what he did too much. I don't know too much about that production world and DJ world and everything, but I just like his character. Again, I like to work with people not so much for their whole technical thing or whether they're, you know, great at turning knobs, but I just, if it's someone I hear something good that they've done and I'd like being around them and their energy. He's got a really great energy. He's always, you know, bringing something great into a room.
So what would you say that he brought to the tracks that he worked on this album?
It's hard to kind of come up with certain words without sounding overly, you know, but I think he brings a vibe, doesn't he? I mean, it's like, we talked about stuff a while back and I just thought it would never happen, and then after coming back from Nashville and being aware that I wanted to do something else in a way, I thought, well, you know, he's definitely something else to what I've done before. People wouldn't expect it in a way. They'd kind of expect me to work with Liam or do whatever in the whole kind of analogue world or whatever, because I guess my music says that in a lot of ways. But I think Andrew represents a lot of other things to people, and his creative ability and all that kind of stuff. So we just talked about it, and I thought I would end up in the studio with him like I usually would. You know, for me, making a record is turning up with my songs and my instruments and playing, but he told me he didn't work like that, and, you know, he wants to, you know, you bring me some really good tracks, you know, sparse tracks, and I'll work on them then afterwards. So it started, mainly the catalyst for this record was a track called Hang My Head in Shame, which started with that track, and I just gave him that track, I think, perhaps a couple of others, but he did something really good with it. I don't know exactly what. I know that he brought Barry into it. I'm aware of that, but there was just this other thing. Again, his whole Andrew Weatherall thing that he does. These people have their thing, and then I thought, wow, this could work. I think it was my friend who I work with, Martin Kelly, who talked about him many times to me and was on about it, and I was kind of like, you know, I don't know. You just don't know about these things. But it did work after hearing that, and then I thought, well, perhaps we can do more. So we did more, and I think he's added some really good things. I really like it, surprisingly. Maybe if it was a couple of years ago, I might have been a bit too scared. But I think I don't know. I feel like I'm up for trying different things a little bit. You know, I mean, I'm never going to kind of have some techno thing going on. Although we have joked about that. I think Andrew kind of ran into Billy at some point and told him that he was working with me, and Billy said, God, I can't wait to hear the, you know, techno record. but I think he's brought some really great things to this.
And next up is Dan Auerbach, who's one half of the Black Keys, one of the hottest rock acts on the planet at the moment. So how did you come to sort of meet and eventually work with him?
I met Dan just like I met Barry, I guess, and anyone else, but I met him at the same time as I recorded with Liam, and that record came out. We were just doing the rounds and in Europe, and we met, I think, at some Mojo event at the Wilton's Music Hall. Have you been to that place?
Yeah.
Incredible place.
It is, yeah.
So I think the people at Mojo were doing this thing, and it was the Black Keys, and, you know, they asked me to come and play, and they were saying some really nice things. So it was like, again, you know, when someone says these things about your record or this song or whichever, you know, whatever they're talking about, I looked into them. And, you know, it's often, I mean, I'm often listening to all of the stuff I listened to from years ago. So I'm never going to wear out listening to a, you know, John Coltrane record or Billie Holiday record or something. But, you know, when you pleasantly discover something that you think is good, you know, that's going on, I was just like, wow, this is great. I saw them play there, actually, for the first time without even listening to the records. I think they had Attack and Release out at that point. And we just, again, like, you know, speaking to Liam or speaking to Barry, or spoke a lot about, he was living in Akron at the time, and we spoke a lot about what we liked, music, this, that, the other, studios, geared, you know. He just, and Pat too, but I mean, Dan I'd really hit it off with. He's a sweet chap, unassuming, doesn't say much unless he needs to, you know, he's just a great musician. And one of the things, actually, not long after that, he did a solo record. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. Everyone's aware of Black Keys stuff, but he did this great record. I really love it. I mean, it's like, I like it even more, I think. I'm not sure. There's some tracks on it, like Trouble Weighs a Ton and stuff, that are just fabulous. He's got a brilliant voice and brilliant musician, you know. And
he ended up playing on, is it the closing track on the album, I think?
No, I think the closing track is a Weatherall track. He played on a song called So Long Gone, which is like, I kind of had it in mind for him. I thought, you know, what I do is a bit different than their thing, you know. But then when I heard his solo record, I heard that he, you know, he also can do these really nice things, you know. He's a blues player, isn't he, really? But I mean, if you listen to that record, you know, you get this whole other thing. And so I had this track in mind. It took a while. Obviously, he's a busy chap. So, but things like that are worth waiting for. So it kind of, you know, finally got him down on it. But and I'd have to repay the favour and sing on one of his tracks. Apparently, that won't be a
hardship, will it? And finally, you've got producer stroke mixer Chad Blake, who he's worked for everybody from the Black Keys to Tom Waits to Al Green and many, many more.
So
he was a big part of the album, wasn't
he? Perhaps the biggest part, actually. I don't know. I mean, I think there's so many areas that makes this record good, in my opinion, anyway. But Chad, I first heard his name again probably later than everyone else. I mean, but I think Dan did mention it to me first, because I think Dan worked with him first. I might be, you know, don't quote me on this, but I think the album Brothers that they did, which kind of really, you know, made them the success that they are, he worked on and mixed, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
And the album after El Camino. I don't know, you know, with the mixing process, again, I don't know how much involvement there is, but obviously a lot, because Dan was really talking to me about Chad and saying, you know, he's in England, you should send him some stuff. And I didn't really pay too much attention until I talked to my manager, and is now my present manager, Gary Stamler, and we were talking about what I should do, you know, creatively. I'd had this Andrew Weatherall track, Hang My Head in Shame, and then it was us talking, and the name Chad Blake came up, which is quite an unusual name anyway. You know, you think it's something like out of Star Trek, but. And then it reminded me of what Dan said, and Gary had worked with Chad for a number of years, so it just, it's a small world, and it kind of, that's the way things happen. And I went over and, you know, I had a few conversations with Chad, and I went over there and did a small recording session. I think he's keen to, he does a lot of mixing, so he's very keen to record as well. Which a track called Easy Street came out of that session, which I really like on this record. And yeah, just again discovered all of this stuff that he'd done. It's so impressive, the people he's worked with.
Yeah, it's an amazing cast list.
And what he's done to this record, you know, again, at that point, I didn't really understand what sending a track to someone does, you know, after you've tracked it and recorded it and got everything down. And, you know, you just think, well, you know, get the levels right and we're master it and we're sorted. But he's incredible what he did. I couldn't actually, there were actually things, I must admit, I think that I wasn't, there were a track or two I wasn't even sure about having on the record, you know. It was that good what he did that I kind of, he changed my mind completely about stuff. When someone can do that, it's pretty impressive, you know. So he's a really amazing guy to be around. I won't, you know, he doesn't enjoy the hype too much, so he's gentle, quiet kind of chap, but he's brilliant.
So, you know, with all of those great people involved, some great songs, obviously, how do you kind of feel at the end of the process of this album? Is it kind of markedly different to your previous work?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess that's kind of, I'll leave that up to everyone else to decide, really. It's always down to the people that are, you know, I mean, going from an album that I did like with Billy to going to work in toe rag even is quite, you know, it's quite a step in ways. I mean, there's the same principles involved. You're kind of in there and you're recording live, and I've had that kind of thing, you know, live element, being in the studio with musicians recording throughout. So that hasn't changed, you know. With this one, you know, I guess what Andrew Weatherall and Chad and Barry and Dan, whoever else is involved in it, you know, all the musicians, Joe and Rupert and Tom and those guys. I just think it's a, you know, it's a large. I just see it as a larger thing. It probably isn't actually. You know, everything's a thing in itself. You know. I just enjoy it at the moment, and I'm into it right now. I'll very quickly be on to the next thing, you know. It's not like I just kind of... I always enjoy kind of playing a show and playing a track from the past, but I like getting on, you know. But I definitely think this is a project I've really enjoyed. I hate that word project for some reason. It makes me sound like I'm kind of in an office. But I really enjoyed this record more than any other. I enjoy listening to it more than any other for some reason.
Well, we wish you absolutely the best of luck with it.
Thanks, mate.
And thanks for joining us today to talk about it.
Absolutely, anytime.
And join us soon for more Cherry Red TV.